Welcome to the November Conclave. This is where we explore new topics. And so it, some of these topics are so brand new that they're just going to be completely at an exploratory level, and there's really no presentation and things like that. That's really what I want the conclave to be. So for anybody attending for the first few times, you can expect us to be totally wild and freewheel. But also, my style of doing this is to keep it as interactive as possible. Mm, Maybe because you could say that I don't want to prepare for it, but that's not true. I do prepare for it. I do my reading, but but also I really want this space to evolve into something where we collectively come up with ideas. So it's meant to be a space where we collectively figure out new things. So your participation is going to be critical, particularly today. So please contribute. You have to get this working. You can't just sit here. That's the point. Okay. With that, let me introduce the topic. I want to today discuss the idea of social health. Okay. Um, and so I want to start by asking you guys to think and share with me, when I say social health, what comes to mind? And let's not, we've done this a few times before, so some of you are familiar with this. We'll not talk about dogs yet, right? So we'll talk about, we are also social beings. So we'll talk about human beings for a bit. And then maybe, the latter part of this, we'll kind of see what aspects of this discussion is indeed applicable for dogs. So what comes to mind when I say social health for a human being?
Uh, Yeah, I mean, I've not put any thought into this when you just said it. More than like physical health, mental health is coming into mind, like social things when you are together, or like how someone's state of mind affects everyone else around in the family, or and the other thing about social health came about is COVID. I mean, that was the biggest thing that came about where everyone was facing the similar thing. But I don't know what we are talking about. Just these are the two things that were coming up for me.
Sure. And this is exactly what I want, right? Like what comes to your mind when I say social health? So when you say COVID, are you talking about something like public health? Right. Okay.
I was thinking more about the relationships one has as opposed to health.
Yeah. And when you say relationships, what do we what do we what are your thoughts that come in there? Like,
Meaningful, like, are you able to have meaningful connections with people around you?
right. Okay. Meaningful connections. Okay. Makes sense. And there's no right or wrong answer here, right? I'm just asking you what comes to your mind. Yeah. No.
Well, so for me, when you said it, for me, it's health for the people that don't have resource to get help and need help.
That's very interesting. Yeah. That's almost like socialistic aspect of things. So there's a political element to that as well, which is interesting. Okay. I think Chandni has typed in something. Yeah, Marina.
I don't seem to be able to raise my hand, but suddenly it's appeared. Anyway, um, safety comes to my mind. Feeling safe because we are social animals, and therefore being social with those that we know, family, friends, whatever it is, brings that feeling of safety.
Right. Yeah. That's another interesting, definitely an interesting one. Yeah. I think Chandni also has something similar. What comes up about social needs? Does the individual feel safe having relationships with others to meet their social needs? Social awareness of health of people around us, physical and mental. So what was interesting for me is when I started looking up on social health, a lot of it had to do with looking at society as a collective and then trying to define health for that collective. And so that could be like what one of you said, it could be the physical health of that collective, or it could be how functional that collective is. As a collective, what is it able to achieve? And there was also an economic component to that, because frequently we do that with collectives. When we look at it, we associate health with how much revenue they're able to generate and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of that. But there was far less in terms of the individual. And so that was interesting for me. And what I really wanted to explore was the just the way we say mental health, physical health of an individual, how healthy is your body, and then mental health of an individual. So that's usually to do with emotions and things like that, and then social health of an individual. And so I wanted to explore what that would mean for a specific individual. What would social health mean? And so you're right. I think many of the things that you spoke about really came up for me as well. One is the nature of the connections that we have. Do we have adequate connections, social connections? Do we have the right, in terms of both quality and quantity? So do we have enough number of connections for us, and is the quality of those connections appropriate for us? That is something that definitely came up. And then the other is the kind of interactions that we're having as well, right? Are we able to interact adequately? And I think some of the ideas that you guys have brought up kind of encompasses that, right? Which is, are you able to engage? Do you feel safe enough to engage with the people around you? It's one thing to have friends. For instance, let's say I was having a conversation with somebody and we were discussing the idea of friends. And in today's day and age with social media, so much of our social contact has become performative instead of experiential. And so are we engaging in social contact which is actually enriching, or are we engaging in social contact that's extremely stressful? So we could have lots of friends, but they could just not be contributing to us in necessarily a way that benefits us, benefits our mental health, benefits our physical health. And so I think there is, one is, do we have enough people and the right kind of people? And the other is also, do we have the tools and opportunity to engage with them in the right kind of way? So I think both are worth exploring. So one is opportunity, but the other is also tools, right? Today, the kind of fractured society that many of us live in, we probably don't even have the tools. So much of urban living, for instance, has become about individual living. We are getting better and better at drawing boundaries and those kind of things, and being independent, and that's glorified so much that coexistence and dependence is seemingly going out of our vocabulary. So we may not have necessarily the tools to engage and utilize our social connection appropriately. We may not even have the tools to know what kind of social contact we need. So what kind of friends do you build? What kind of support system do you build? We may not even be aware of that. And with social media influencing so much of this, we may even be having a very different set of ideas on what kind of social contact we need, right? Um, and what kind of so-called friends we need. So I think these are all interesting and worthy explorations. I want to get into discussing why do we need sort of a healthy social connection around us or healthy connections around us and contact. But what are your thoughts so far on this? How do you feel about this idea of social health? What are your thoughts? Do you feel like there's a good understanding of it? Have you had conversations about this in the past? Do people deliberately think about this? Have you thought about it in any context? Yeah, Marina.
No, haven't had conversations, certainly not with friends or family about social health and that side of things, apart from extrapolating the fact that COVID affected so many because of the fact that there was no social contact for many. And we know that that has affected children and adolescents, particularly because of that lack of social contact. But it's never gone further than that. It's been, yes, it happened, so we know we need it. And I often use it, and I know we're not talking dogs, but I often use it as an example for dogs, close the bracket, but have not gone further to explore. Sorry, I have a dog who's moving the laptop. Thank you. And so it's been a very sort of just not even really touching the surface of the issue.
Yeah. COVID was very interesting, right? I think it was one of the first times that we actively started thinking about this, because it's not that we didn't have social contact at all. Our online activity shot through the roof for many of us. So we were actually more connected and connected with more people across the globe, and we had nothing else to do. So most of us were online almost all the time, connected in many, many ways. But I would argue that our social health dropped
Yeah.
significantly, right? The quality of that connection, the nature of that connection, I think changed dramatically, and it became like an unhealthy connection. So to me, it's almost like, have you had food versus have you had healthy food? Right? I think the two can be different. You could have lots and lots of food, but that doesn't mean you're having healthy food. It's not necessarily nurturing you and doing the right things for you. And so I think that was an interesting exposure to start thinking about this idea of how is your social health? Is it good? And COVID was, I think, a great time to say, I'm fine, but my social health is, right? Like, yeah.
I think it also depends on personality and people and where you live. If you're living in a tiny apartment, 4 plus 6 children, slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean, confined, you can't get out, you're getting on each other's nerves. It's going to be a much more difficult situation than if you live in lovely countryside and you've got space and you enjoy your own company. I think that makes a big difference too.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one, right? So I think one aspect of it was a lot of people not having the right kind of connection, but also having an overdose of certain kinds of connection. I think there was that aspect of it as well. I think social health maybe not only includes connection as in the need to connect and are you getting enough, but also are you getting enough space away from it. So I think that there is that component of social contact that comes into social health, which is, I think, a very useful one. And that's similar to, for instance, physical movement, right? One physical movement, it's not just like because a little is good, a lot is always great, right? Physical movement also requires you to, do you have enough movement, but also do you have adequate rest? So, the two together is what gives you that benefit and puts you in that sweet spot of, this is healthy lifestyle. I think maybe social connection also falls in that category of sort of connection, attachment and detachment, and the right proportion of it. And you're right in that I think much like physical health and mental health, I think social health also relies heavily on the individual component of it, which is what is it that's right for me, and how much of different things do I need. Are you comfortable in your own company? But also, what are my current needs? Right? Am I going through a phase where I need a lot of connection, or am I going through a phase where I need a lot of reflection? So is this, a phase thing? Have I had a life experience? For me, COVID, the first part of COVID was not problematic at all because I had a lovely big house, Uttam, my dogs, and we really enjoyed each other's company. We had the right space for it. And considering that we were in Bangalore city and had it up to here with, all kinds of connections in the city, the first lockdown was cozy, very cozy. I think my social health did not suffer in that sense. But by the time we hit second lockdown, I had lost Nishi and Uttam. And that was the period at which I did need connection, which I didn't have. And so I think, I don't know if my social health necessarily, I will say, took a beating. I think it did. I think I needed more. But I also think that the intimate connection I had with Chiru helped me maintain the health, the social health that I needed. Yeah, complex, very complicated. Yeah, Lena, I'm bouncing off to you because my thoughts are all over the place suddenly. Yes.
Yeah, so are mine. Even my thoughts are all over the place. It's more like, so when you speak about, the first thing that came to my mind when you spoke about social health was to do with the health of the whole city that I live in. Like Bangalore, it is deteriorating so badly. And my interactions, I literally, if I have a good interaction, it makes my day. But most of my interactions with anything, like it can be like small things. It's just like it just triggers you off in like so the health of the whole society is deteriorating. I can see that. And everyone speaks the same thing of the whole, how the city, like everyone's talking about the environment, the traffic, the thing, and there's so much of like negativity. And if you see what's with the road rage, I don't know if like, because there itself, like the society, the health of the whole city seems to be deteriorating. So that's what I got from, like, because my interactions are literally limited now. I don't want to interact with people. I don't want to like have, social connections with people. I'm staying away from it so that it doesn't, because they already come with that whole, or I think that they come with that whole, you know, negativity, which they are also battling with. So it's very, yeah.
Yeah. So this idea of social health is a very interesting one, right? Because I think the interconnectedness comes through like so strongly in this. It's very hard to separate the individual and the collective, because the health of the collective impacts the individual, and the health of the individuals impacts the collective, and the line between the two is so blurred. So I think it's a very interesting one, and it's also, I think, the conduit which connects for instance, your physical health to social health or health of your society. Let's not call it social health, the health of your society, right? You as an individual and how you experience your physical health, why should that impact the health of your society or um, the ability of your society to function as a society, right? And so I think it draws that line so clearly. And again, I think COVID was such a great example. Yeah. Okay. I think that let's take a slightly different approach, right? Let's ask ourselves, why do we need an individual lens on social health? As an individual, when we look at your health and say, okay, how are you doing as a being, right? I'd like to track you. I'm tracking your blood pressure. I'm tracking like your physical indicators. I am going to track your mental health indicators. So, what's your mood and so on and so forth. And then let's track your social health. So that is, are you getting the kind of connections that you need, enough of it, and the kind of it, and are you getting enough space from it, which we just discovered is also a necessary part of it. But um, but then why do we need social health? What are your thoughts? Why is this conversation even relevant? Or is it? Or is it not?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes up for me is friends. Like, I mean, though we have we have partners, we have family, but like last year there was a friend who was moving out of Bangalore, and I could feel, like I'm not getting the connection that I wanted, or like, you need, you just basically need to talk to someone else. Like, you can't just base all your social needs to onto one person. You have different people for your different social needs. Like, you will have your parents for something else, you'll have your partner for something else. And I feel friends play a very vital role in that. And sometimes you don't, even friends are at different phases in their lives, right? Like, they might be going through something else. And then, so when you need connection, they're not there. Or when they need you are not there, you're at some other level. So I think friends play a very important role in social, I mean, in your health. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think friends is one way to look at it, but it could be those constant connections, right? It could be co-workers too that you're meeting on a day-to-day basis. You might be getting something out of them that you do not always realize. So for instance, the workers who come here and work here, I don't have much like that kind of social contact with them, but the fact that they're here plays a big role. So there are like there are connections which don't have to be deep and meaningful, but I just want presence of people. Like, I need to hear talking, right? So I think there are many different kinds of connections, but you're right. Yeah, Kannan? No, you've not unmuted yourself. Yeah.
So something I've learned about myself over the recent years is I'm very selectively social. I'm not asocial, but I like my solitude. But I do like meaningful connections from time to time. And I see that it benefits me in growing emotionally as an individual. And the second benefit I see for myself is safety. Some connections help me feel safe. And then some connections are like energy sapping. So I want to keep space from that.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? Yes, absolutely. I think your social health, I think, does impact your mental health. And I think that's a very straightforward connection, right? Like, it's very evident that you need those connections, you need the right kind of connections. But the idea of safety and to feel safe, if you are feeling unsafe all the time, your cortisol levels are going to be through the roof, right? So I think that starts then kind of tying it back to your physical health as well. But I would also argue that apart from this kind of tying it back to this long route of tying it back to physical health through cortisol and stress, I think there's also a more practical connection to it, which is, who the hell's going to take you to the hospital if you have collapsed? Which is also part of social connection, right? Are there enough people around you to help you physically, to assist you when you need? And let's say that you're not around, ambulances that's available at the press of a button, right? So is that there? Is there somebody to actually call out to you? Listen, looks like you're going into something. Sit. Let me call someone. Like, is there somebody to do that? I think there are those aspects of how your social health can impact. Like, it's a very direct aspect as well, which we don't think about, right? We don't think about the fact that physical health is not only about what is available from a medical perspective, but also who's going to do you have the necessary assistance to get you there. Similarly with mental health as well, for instance during the lockdown, especially the second one, because there I really was struggling. I was struggling to feed myself. I was struggling to take care of myself mentally, and I had friends who would come over with food, right? Come over with good food. Now, while it is technically available, it wasn't emotionally available for me because I was emotionally incapable of providing that to myself. And even after Chiru passed away, that's something that I realized very quickly, right? Is that I wasn't emotionally capable of feeding myself. And so I would, that's why I went off to the Ayurveda place, because I was like, I need somebody to actually I need the kind of social connection that involves feeding, like, motherly thing where somebody is like, you need to be fed. Sit at the table, you need to be fed. And now I have a few friends who do that for me. I know who are the mums. And when I'm really struggling, I just show up at their place because I know that that's what they do for me. So I think there is that aspect of it as well. Um, Simone, I saw your hand go up and then down.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts have been like drifting, so I kind of, yeah, was thinking about something off topic, but now current topic. But yeah, I've been thinking about social health a lot. Actually, it's been at the forefront of my mind because I live between two countries and my social health is very noticeably different in each situation. So when I'm in New Zealand, I'm in a town where I'm one of the only brown people there. I'm also quite isolated in comparison to when I'm in Sri Lanka, where there are people everywhere. So when I'm there, I go without being like touched physically for months sometimes. Sorry, if I haven't seen a friend in a few weeks, like there's no hug, So I did notice the consequences of that physical kind of aspect of social health. And I also felt a sense of freedom from a very tight-knit community where sometimes when a community is really small and you see the same people all the time, there might be conversations that just aren't healthy for anyone, really. So I had some, sense of freedom from that, and I felt that that was feeding me in other ways. And then now I'm back and I'm very aware of how I contribute to conversation and going back into that small space. And I actually feel like when there are very few people who are in a community, like maybe 4 or 5, who see each other a lot, each person seems to visibly bring something to the table. And it really impacts the health of the group, like mentally and physically as well. If you like have it in you to you're feeling good and you can cook for someone else, then that, and even like the taking to the doctors and things like that Sindhu mentioned, I can see the direct link between that individual health and social health in these small groups.
Yeah. So lots of interesting points there. The one thing that you brought up is, of course, physical contact, right? Touch. I think that's a very interesting one. I remember visiting my friend in the US. She's of Indian origin, and her partner was sick, and he needed to be in the hospital for a prolonged period of time to get some surgery and things like that. And she was so frustrated with the medical system there because she was like, the doctor doesn't touch. And she was like, I need that reassuring touch. I need that, you know, hold my hand and say you will be okay. I need touch. And I mean, that's her, right? I'm not that person. So I think that that can also vary. But and she was telling me the story of, I think she was on a flight. I know that only some cultures will do things like this, but she was on a flight and there was turbulence and she was afraid. And she caught on to the person next to her and held on to him tightly. Him being Indian was comfortable with this. I don't know how many people would have been okay with this. And they ended up in a situation where she invited him over to her house for dinner, right? He was like, you need to come over. She's like, the sweet boys, you know, and he's a student, I think. He just, you know, just landed in the US. So he was quite happy that this lady was like, come, I'll feed you and stuff like that. I'll feed you Indian food, come over. And for those of you who know about Indian food, you'll understand why this is a big deal. um, so I think there is that aspect of it, which is physical contact, the kind of contact we need. I do think we all need some kind of contact, and that's different for, you know, each of us. But there is that aspect of it. So I was, you know, we did talk about components of social health, right? So we talk about connection and the nature of connection, and we have spoken about, you know, emotional support in that connection. We've spoken about space in that connection, but also I think the kind of touch that is involved is one aspect of it. But the other that you bring up is also contribution. So it's not just what we get, but what we give, the desire to give. Most of us have a desire to give as well. And there is a role, I think that plays a role too. I think that may tie back to things like purpose, um, giving you an identity within the community, within your social circle. Who are you within your circle of friends? If nobody is calling upon you at all, nobody needs anything from you at all, you're only on the receiving end of things, you are a 40-year-old baby or whatever, however old you are, would that be a comfortable connection for you? And then, you know, recently I wrote this article about love, right? You feel it in your bones. What is love really? And it's a feeling, but also it's a desire to give. So when I see these guys, there is a desire in me to do something for them. So I literally like potter about the house to say, okay, what can I do? Can I give them like a bed? Can I like pet them? I want to do something special for them. That feeling comes up very frequently for me, especially with people I feel nice about. Um, my site manager here, I feel very, you know, I feel very warm towards her. So every time I go to the city and I think of coming back, I end up thinking about, I want to take back something nice for her for no reason other than I want to do that. And I felt that a lot. Again, I think for me, the big learning here was a lot of it happened after Uttam died, right? um, I would go to the city, take myself out on dates, which is great, right? Like, oh, you can take yourself out on a date, you can take care of yourself and all of that. Great in terms of individualism. I get, you know, 100 on 100 points for that. But I would sit there and I would feel like I have this great meal, great wine, great dessert and all that. But I want to share it with someone and not, there is an emptiness that I felt. And so I would then, from that restaurant, bring back food for Chiru because it wasn't just about bringing food for her. I needed to share that experience with her. Right? And I still do that. I still do that if I go out to eat and I'm eating out alone. I feel the need to share that. So I'll bring something from there for the people back home because either it's for over here or I get something for the dogs. Because I think there is this need of, I want to do something for you. And there is also the need for, I want shared experiences with you. So it's not about what I get and what I give, but what we do together. I think there is that aspect of it as well. Again, all over the place with this. But Chandani says, we are social beings. This quote is popping in my mind. The best thing for a nervous system is another nervous system, but the worst thing for a nervous system is another nervous system, making me feel we are wired for connection. So there is a very interesting and very, very difficult book to read. I've read like 3 pages of it in the last, I think, several months. It's called 1,000 Plateaus. It talks about the idea of, instead of looking at the world, much of post-Renaissance, post-Enlightenment view of the world has been a hierarchical view of the world, which is called an arborescent view, right? Like a tree. So there is a main branch which branches off, and then there are like multiple branches. And so that is the view of the world, and that view of the world makes it into pretty much how we try to understand anything in modern science. So if you look at, for instance, how we classify things, right? We classify it as plant and animal, and then under animal there is, multiple, subcategories. So there's like mammals and whatnot. And then under plant, there is multiple categories. And then under each of them, there are multiple categories. So these are arborescent views, right? They are sort of tree views. They're called trees, right? Even in, let's say that you map it out in a graph, they're all called tree views, right? And then there is a rhizomatic view of things, which is like fungi, right? Fungal networks don't have like a single node that branches off. So there isn't a main node, and then it branches off into subnodes, which then branches off into subnodes, and, in smaller and smaller. Instead, it's chaotic connection, interconnectedness, and there is intensity of connection and sparseness of connection. Everything seems interconnected. It's like a web. And if you like move something here, you don't know what moves elsewhere. There's a wave. And there seems to be like a collective thought. So it isn't one individual. So this thing that Chandani, all of this is to kind of come back to your point. This idea of a nervous system itself. So the rhizomatic view takes the view that there isn't an individual nervous system and then another nervous system, and then the two either connect or disconnect. The idea is that they're all interconnected. So you as an individual don't exist. You exist only because of the connections, and the connection needs you. So yeah, just to complicate things, I needed to add that in. And so there was a really interesting blog that, in a podcast that sprung from it, the idea of an organization without a head. That we're all part of organizations, and then organization without a head. There isn't one, but we're all connected. It's a very different way of looking at the world if you try to classify the world based on that. Like, imagine science saw the world that way and didn't say, okay, there is plant and there is animal. Under animal, there is, fish and mammal and whatnot, and insect and so on and so forth. Didn't look at it that way, but actually looked at everything as interconnected. How would we then classify? Is there an idea of classification? It's a very dramatically different way of looking at things. And I think if we have to look at social health, anything to do with social, that might be an interesting model to kind of bring in and look at. Yes, I am all over the place. Okay, let me ask you something else. What can social health do for us? Good social health. Actually, I want to phrase that a little differently. Say, I'm all over the place. That's why I'm trying to figure this out. I think what I'm trying to bring in here is, we know that it helps with physical health. We know that it helps with mental health. But, before that, I think there are things that it does for us. For instance, and the thought that led to this question is, for instance, does good social health only mean positive in social interactions? Can, for instance, negative, so-called negative interactions also be part of good social health? We've spoken about this in a previous conclave. You remember the one we spoke about conflict? Where we spoke about conflict as maybe not a side effect, but actually an essential part of social connection, necessary part of social connection. So let's talk about that. Can there be things that are not seen as positive that need to be part of social health? I'm not wording this very well, but I think you may understand what I'm asking. Yeah, Simone.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring this up because today I had like a study group with this nonviolent communication thing that I do, and as part of it, it was a study group. It was the first study group, and these two people had completely different ideas of a strategy they wanted to use to study. One person wanted to like read a textbook and summarize, and another person wanted to have more of an immersive, explorative kind of way of being. And it ended up being in this nonviolent communication group, it ended up having everyone was witness to two people being quite assertive about their needs, because it's about in being in touch with your feelings and identifying needs behind those feelings, and everyone's advocating for themselves. So it was this group that was supposed to, everyone was looking for connection and grounding, and it ended up being like everyone was like highly stimulated and things like that. And it was cool to see because there's 7 people, and at the end of it, each one has a go at, I don't know, like reflecting on how it's feeling for everyone, or just looking after each other, and the celebration of the shared sense of safety to even have those kinds of conflicts and conversations. So it was a really good example of how that conflict was actually necessary in some way, for everyone to actually realize that, oh, this is a safe place. Like we could say this, whereas in any other situation, we can't even say this. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so many thoughts that come up. Yeah, Kannan?
Yeah, for me personally, I would say I have found it extremely challenging to regulate my emotions. I'm also someone who tends to be, just extremely like hormonal all the time. And it takes, or it used to take very little for me to, just dysregulate. And, um, you know, over the years, I've just learned how to build that, I would say these negative sort of interactions or conversations have helped me get some emotional regulation. It has helped me ground myself. It's helped me, take a minute to identify when my nervous system is dysregulated. I've learned these emotional tools over the years to be able to come back to it and pick the conversation up maturely. So I would say that I would say those negative interactions have, or conversations or connections, have helped me grow. And the other thing I would say is, also set clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is exactly what came up when we spoke about, what both of you said is also what came up when we did the conclave on conflict, right? Which is when we spoke about what could be the benefit of conflict, much of it talks about growth. Growth frequently comes from conflict. And I think growth as in growth of an individual. So I look at it like resistance training, right? Like strength training, which is that there is a certain amount of resistance, and that's also kind of building your muscle, and building your resilience in some way. So I think the tension that comes from negative social interactions could also feed into building your physical and emotional health in the right dose. Obviously, everything has to be in moderation. Whoa, what's up, man? And then the other interesting one for me was also like I was looking at gossip. Gossip as somebody, I had an argument with somebody who was like, oh, that's not a good thing to have. If you have like a healthy social connection, we don't do gossip. And I was like, no, I disagree. I think gossip is absolutely a necessary part of good social interaction. And at that time I was coming purely from an experiential perspective, but I know that and typically women are associated with gossip, but you know that this is not right. I mean, I think you know about the data that that's not entirely true. And so I learned about the value of gossip in an organization where a male boss showed me this, where we had an employee who quit, and immediately he started gossiping smack about her, and the group started talking about her. And I came and I said, I don't, should we really be gossiping about this person that, who left? And he said, yeah, it was very intentional on his part. He said, no, yes, I want to do this because I want, people to learn a lesson or something. He had some reasoning for it, which is irrelevant. But he was very intentionally kind of using gossip in the organization to deal with that situation. And when I looked up at the literature on it, it talks about gossip as being a necessary part of the social fabric to possibly, potentially transmit culture and cultural rules. So that's kind of how culture gets transmitted if people do things that are not meant to be part of the culture. And that a lot of culture has to do with keeping the group cohesive so that there's strength in numbers, right? And so keeping the group collected and cohesive, and there are rules to communities, and communicating those rules without necessarily, like, nobody is going to tell you that the rules of this community are this. Every time you join a community, there isn't like a very explicit, think of, for instance, religion-based communities and region-based communities, right? Nobody is coming and telling you rules are this. How do you learn the rules? Because there'll be gossip about people who don't follow the rules. And that's kind of how you start realizing, okay, you're not required to make the mistakes to learn it. They're taught to you preemptively through gossip. And so, and all cultures apparently have gossip to the point where people are now trying to speculate, sociologists are now trying to speculate on its role in maintaining the social structure. Now, that brings me to this thing, right? If we have things like gossip that are meant to play a role for society, and individuals have to participate in it, which means that there's internal motivation for us that's going to be built in us to give us pleasure or pain, to reward us internally, to engage in those behaviors that are meant for the good of the society. Is that making sense? So, for instance, we have internal motivators to want to reproduce, not because offspring necessarily is good for us. Having offspring is good for society, but the internal motivators for that are built in us as an individual. Right? So it is pleasurable to engage in mating activities or even companionship, so that we take on this arduous task, difficult task, a very demanding task of actually having babies, but that's meant to help the society. Right? And similarly, there could be internal motivators for us to engage in behaviors that eventually benefit society. And when we say benefit society, please don't get hung up on good and bad and your idea of what benefits society. Society is frequently benefited when they come together, and they may come together for all the wrong reasons. But a social group is benefited because they're together, right? That is what gives them that advantage, is that they strengthen numbers and they hold together, and they might hold together for all the wrong reasons, but it's good for that society because that's what makes them succeed and that's what makes them survive. And so then that kind of train of thought leads you to believe that these negative interactions that we engage in. Every social interaction, good social health does not necessarily mean I have the person to talk to about, all things nice. Good social health could also include I engage in adequate gossip. I get into enough number of fights. I get into enough number of arguments. And maybe good social health includes all that. Now we're going to come to dogs and you'll see why I'm getting there, right? Because we spoke about this when we spoke about conflict too. When dogs argue with each other, is that probably part of good social health for them? When dogs gang up together against another dog and bully another dog, is that possibly good social health for them? Okay. While you think about that, also, so those of you who have had a chance to observe free living dogs, streeties, usually streeties, free living animals engage in behaviors that are part of their ethogram that's necessary and right for them, right? So if we see the behaviors there, we have to think about, okay, why is it there? Do you see them engaging in behaviors like this, ganging up, conflict, arguments, negative social interaction? What are examples? I can see a lot of you nodding. Yeah, Juhi.
So one example is of like the younger guys ganging up on the older. Like I don't know why they don't want her there anymore. So she was part of the group, but then now she's old, so now she's secluded to one place, and now there's no interact. They were friends before, like they would hang out together, but as she got to a certain age, is when this transition happened, and so they've let her be now. They don't attack her, but she should not come in their vision. But they know that she's their end of the road.
Yeah. So I remember talking about the idea of elders in dog societies, right? And I presented this in the US, and one of them was like, oh, it's interesting that you see it in street dogs. We don't see it in our pet dogs because, the older dog, the younger dogs seem to attack the older dogs a lot of times. And to me, immediately, I was like, no, that's on point, right? It's very much on point because we do see that. We see that in human societies too. Older people can there's often elder abuse and things like that, isolating them from society and treating them badly. While there is a aspect of it where there is respect, there's also the other aspect of it where there is abuse and exploitation of vulnerability, and maybe that is a natural part of that dynamic. So yeah, Kannan.
Yeah, I've typically seen these gangs when there's just general tension around resources, whether it's food or a person. And most of the times, I think our free living dogs are smart enough to de escalate on their own without much intervention from people. And the other instance would be like, especially around Diwalis when there is a lot of displacement, a new dog has walked into a new gang's area. So an unfamiliar surrounding can also cause these kind of tensions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think resource driven is definitely a kind of conflict that we see. And I think that we can put in a separate category altogether of its own. But I would argue that we also see conflict that doesn't have to do with resource, which can be quite surprising. So for instance, competition for the sake of competition. No need to compete, but just compete for the sake of it, right? These guys, this has been my bane for the last couple of years actually, is my neighbor, they go to the neighbor's house and go and argue with those dogs for no reason at all. There is no competition over resources. I'm feeding them till they can't eat anymore. They have the space. Those dogs are locked up. But every evening they seem to go there and have this shouting match, and they come back looking extremely thrilled with themselves. And it has nothing to do with, nobody's putting them in this position. They even, to the point where they're going and sticking their face through that fence and coming back with bites, and they have chicken as well. They're coming back with the chicken having pecked their face, and they seem to love that too. They come back, if they come back with wounds here, I know exactly what they've done, right? Nobody put you in this situation. Nobody asked you to go there. You went and did this. But I think there is some internal motivator that makes them actually enjoy this conflict, this negative interaction. And I'm beginning to suspect that there may be other kinds of negative interactions too that is self-rewarding with an internal motivator. So just as they seem to make friends, they also seem to like having having a falling out with friends. They're not friends anymore. So and that kind of reminds me of, like, there seems to be this idea of lovers quarrel, which seems to be a very pleasurable kind of an experience. It's very twisted, but it's very much part of it. And I think toxic positive kind of thinking that's come in, we don't want to admit that some of these things feel very good, and they feel good for a reason. And I think if we acknowledge it, there's power in acknowledging it, because I feel like if we acknowledge it, we may be able to find ways of meeting those needs, not necessarily by hurting another being, but if we have to talk about how do we meet these needs. I remember having this conversation with somebody where we were like, if you don't have those quarrels and that conflict with the people in a healthy way, then you go back, sit in your mother's basement, get on the computer and go have fights with people online and have arguments with people online, right? So I think we do need to engage in some of these. And so before we do that, and before we talk about how do we engage in it in a positive way, what is the underlying need, is a conversation we need to have. And for that, we need to acknowledge that we do seem to have need for negative experiences, negative social experiences. It's very much part of social connection. I don't think social connections can exist if it's all positive, all polite, all PC. I don't think for instance, totally PC, politically correct connections never seem to have depth. So much of what Uttam and I experienced is because of the crap that we went through together, right? They can bring us very close together. So absolutely. Kanan, I'll come to you in a second. I think Simone had her hand up, and let me check with her and then come to you.
Sorry, I had to go for a second, but I think, yeah, Kanan can go for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Kanan?
So when you were talking about how your dogs go to the neighbor's place and, just stick their head through the fence and get all pecked and are very proud about it, this kind of situation is reminding me, as you were talking, I had this picture of our Bangalore streets, and you may not even be involved in a fight, but all these gully boys, they just pile on, and there's just this thrill in being a part of that experience,
Yeah.
that drama that's happening. And everybody walks away from it like happily after, whatever has happened. So I was drawing parallels with this. It could be instigated by one person or one dog, and then the others just sort of pile on for the thrill of it, if it's
Yeah.
making sense.
Yeah. So yeah, ganging up, piling on, winning battles. I think winning feels good, and that can't happen unless somebody's losing. I think winning is not just, hey, I won something, but I won it from somebody. Like somebody lost and I won. The other also was politics, like playing politics, having political games. Kind of scheming and plotting would be pointless if it were against like trees, right? Like we scheme and plot in our social structures. And so I think that kind of playing that social structure a little bit, I think there is that also that kind of feels good. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think social health, it's interesting. When we started, I don't think we thought we would go in this direction, right? But it's beginning to get very dark very quickly. But I feel like social health needs a much more honest conversation on what needs to go into the social fabric of an individual. I think talk about it only collectively. I think here's the problem. I think we talk about physical and mental health as only an individual thing. I don't think it is. I think there is an interconnectedness to it. And we talk about social health only as a collective thing. I don't think that's it either. I think there are aspects of social connection that an individual experiences that needs to be factored in. I think there's a need for us to feel a certain set of things, experience certain set of things. I think there is a need that is, if it's unmet, it can drive us a little crazy, or it, can impact us. But also, I think this is something that we see in literature for sure, is that it mediates health. It mediates your mental and physical health. So you may have the best diet, but best diet plus social contact gives you something. You may have great therapy, but great therapy plus something, or you have exercise, but exercise plus social contact, the right kind of social support gives you something. So I think there is a mediation aspect, there is a availability and immediately showing up and support aspect, but there's also like need, right? Like a desire, like I need to punch someone. I don't mean that that's the only thing, but I need to talk to somebody. I need, and a great example of that is loneliness, right? Like if you don't have that connection, touch, right? Like craving for that contact, either touch or talk or whatever it is. So I think there are different ways in which social health manifests in us. Yeah, Marina.
Just very quickly, because I know we're running out of time. Picking up on the various points that have been said, whether it's the dogs that go and stick their nose and be pecked on, or the fact that you're looking at something to be done. I wonder to what extent there isn't, and you were talking about scheming and so on and so forth, that a certain amount of boredom comes into play. What am I going to do? And depending on the personality, it could be an act of kindness, or it could be, let's go and, get him riled up. And then you've got the followers.
Yes.
So, I don't know who in your current little group of dogs is the one that potentially takes them off. And therefore the others are all going, yay, let's go. It's so much fun. And that if that particular one wasn't there, maybe they'd go off and do something else.
Yeah.
Or maybe they would find something to entertain themselves and therefore not have that feeling.
Yeah, you're right. The one who leads, the instigator, is always Chaitu. She's sleeping here, the mum. And these two are the followers. And you're absolutely right. If she weren't there, if she weren't leading them into these political battles that are entirely her,
And
she's
if
the
Dude was
political
still
one.
there and not her,
Yes.
it wouldn't happen either.
Yes, it would be a very different scene altogether. He just wasn't politically sharp. And if Yaya were leading, she would largely be like, let's sunbathe. That's the most fun thing. Let's go to the lake. Like she's a very peace-loving dog. But it's really interesting that you bring up boredom, because boredom, loneliness, these are, I think, the drivers of social engagement. If we didn't have boredom at all, if we didn't have loneliness at all, none of us would have struggled with COVID. Right? And I don't think we would put ourselves through Bangalore city to go meet people, put ourselves to tolerate the idiosyncrasies of our friends so that we continue to remain friends, put ourselves through something called marriage. I think boredom and loneliness are two of several other possible drivers of engaging in social activity, which is expensive, and engaging in negative social activity that can be even more expensive. I wonder why they exist. They exist for a reason. They're driving us into doing some things for a reason. And I think these things, violence, gossip, conflict, all are in some way necessary for social cohesion in some sense. And I think that's probably why we do it.
Mhm.
Artemis says, I also believe the choice to join or not join the group in something, or support or not support an individual in the group in an activity, also plays an important role in social health and learning too. Yes, absolutely. I think choice is a big thing, right? And anybody who comes from a culture that is extremely socially cohesive, like an Indian culture, will tell you immediately. We hate it that we're put in situations where we don't have a choice to say, no, I don't want to be part of it. We just hate it. And if you're living in isolation, COVID style, right? You're cut off from society, but you're not given a choice. We hate it. So having the choice to withdraw when we want to, having the choice to join when we want to, I think is important. Another thing that I have been seeing in the last 3 months with all that that's been going on, when I express my pain, I can see many of you have the need to say, I want to contribute. I want to be part of it. I want to help. So I think there are I think that sense of belonging, that's the other one that I was kind of going for, right? That sense of belonging. I belong to your circle. I belong to this cause. I belong to this sort of fraternity, whatever it is. That brings with it a sense of safety and many other things with it. So I think those also are drivers of interesting social behavior. Okay, we're out of time. I think we can talk about this for another hour if we had to, but I also think we need a break from it because it's like brought up a lot of things, and I think we're all over the place. So I would love for you guys to think about this and see what else comes up. And if anything else comes up, like send it across. I have a reason for doing this because I'm giving a talk on this topic early next year. So anything that comes up for you, like send it across. I want to mull over it and then put my talk together. And of course, the recording will go up and the comment section under that will be open. So you can go put your comments there too, or just do it on the WhatsApp group too. All right, guys, this was fun. I had a great time. And I will then see you next month.